And I'm a presidential ambassador at Colorado State University. And I'm here today with Kim King, who is also a presidential ambassador at CSU, and three incredible women who are going to discuss entering and thriving in the workplace as women. Shatonna Allen is the Human Resource Director at Arrow Electronics. Jeanie Bidner serves as Vice President of the branch network at Charles Schwab, and Noelle Marshall serves as a Senior Account Executive with the Schaeffler Group. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us today.
Women in the Workplace session today starts our spring series of live interviews that we will be producing with our alumni and friends of the university in a variety of fields. We hope folks tuning in are able to use these informational interview videos as learning tools when deciding on their desired career path or when learning about a new industry. We also invite any questions you have for our panelists to be shared in the chat.
All right, Shatonna, Jeanie, and Noelle, another huge thank you for joining us today. Would each of you just take a minute or two to share a little bit about your background and your current role?
Noelle, you want to start, or?
Yeah, I can go. So hi everyone, my name is Noelle. I graduated in 2012 with my mechanical engineering degree from CSU. And during my last year of school, I was an intern actually at Arrow Electronics, where Shatonna works. And I spent almost 9 years there. And now currently I'm with a company called Schaeffler, and they are a supplier to the big automotive OEMs for mechanical and electromechanical components.
So I'm happy to go next. I'm Jeanie Bidner. I work at Charles Schwab. I went to CSU from 2002 to 2006 and graduated with a business finance degree. Although I never actually thought I would go into finance, but here I am 15 years later in finance still. I moved to Phoenix actually right after college and worked to try to get a number of different types of jobs. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do coming out of college, to be honest. And through a friend of a family, I had heard that Charles Schwab was hiring in Phoenix. And so I put my application in and got a job as a phone broker. And then once getting to Schwab, I've sort of moved around every 3 years or so. You know, the company is quite large and there's a lot of different opportunity. I started in Phoenix, moved to San Francisco for 5 years, and then I've been back in Denver for about 5 years as well, and kind of moved around in that time, which has been, you know, really nice to have the opportunity to try different things and see what you like. So that's a little bit about me.
And good afternoon, everyone. Happy International Women's Day 2021. This is a great year and a great day for that. So my name is Shatonna Allen. As Thane mentioned, I'm the Human Resources Director at Arrow Electronics. Arrow is a technology enablement company, is probably the best way to describe the company. They really enable technology and, you know, I would say businesses and organizations to you know, find the right connections to really enable some of the innovative things that you kind of see out in the world. So I graduated from CSU in 2002 with my undergraduate degree, and then I actually went back to CSU for my master's degree. And so, you know, my money and my time certainly has gone into CSU. My undergrad was actually in communications with an emphasis in media. I thought for sure that I wanted to be on TV, and that was what I aspired to be initially. When I got out of school, I actually started to work in a management role for the Marriott, which communications Marriott, that just really doesn't really mix. And then it wasn't actually until later in my career, probably, gosh, when I think about it, maybe, I don't know, 8 or so years later that I decided to kind of pursue a career in HR. So my graduate degree in organizational performance and change is really focused around, you know, really developing kind of that organizational strategy and change management approaches for organizations. And so that's kind of where I got my niche maybe and started to kind of pursue that. But I started first in communications. So here we are. Glad to be here.
Thank you all for sharing a little bit about yourselves, how you got to your career path, and what that journey looked like. So as women in the workplace, have you faced particular challenges or successes that you might want to share with the group? And Shatonna, why don't we start with you this time?
Sounds great. I think as a woman in the workplace, when I think about my career growing up, really kind of developing what and who I was as a professional, the challenges I'd say I faced were a lot of myself, right? It was a lot of myself getting in my way around what it is I thought I was capable of doing, those things that I pursued and that I didn't pursue, the things that I thought I was ready for and not. And I would say in many ways in my career, I can say that I was probably my biggest obstacle. And so that's something that I've certainly learned growing through my career, to take chances, to be, and live with a little bit more grit, and just kind of take some of those chances that I see my colleagues often, my male colleagues taking, and it's okay for me to kind of go after the same opportunities.
So I can tack on to that, and I agree wholeheartedly, Shatonna. When I was planning for this and thinking about, my own career and kind of where I've gone, I honestly have not felt any personal adversity against me as a female. I think it all comes from within. Any challenges that I faced, it's sort of self-imposed, unfortunately. I do work in a male-dominated industry in finance, and our firm is, we always get the report outs from HR in terms of just diversity in the workplace at Schwab. And, females are certainly outnumbered, but even given that, I've had 10 bosses in the last 15 years, and 5 have been men, 5 have been women. It sort of depends where I have been organizationally that sort of dictated who I work with, or the composition of who I work with. As an example, when I've been more in frontline roles where I'm working directly with clients, I seem to be surrounded by more male peers. But when I've worked in support functions and project management, I've been surrounded by more female peers. So it sort of depends on where I sit. So it's not just the company as a whole, it's kind of the job that you hold or the function within the company. But again, even given that, each boss has their own style, certainly, and there's probably a style based on their gender, but I've sort of picked up from every single person I've worked with a little nugget that I can either say, I'm going to take this and, add this to my approach, or I'm going to take this and never do this type of thing that this boss did. You sort of take what you learn and what you like from different people. But, I do feel very fortunate to not have felt hurdles due to being a woman. And in fact, I think right now there is so much focus on getting more diversity and getting more women into certain roles that I think, we're at a really good, it's a great time to join the workforce, because people want women, people want diverse candidates. I think there's definitely an appreciation that the more diversity of experience and background actually helps us all in the end. So yeah, I haven't personally faced it. I think if anything, it's been my own reservations about my own, what I can do and what I can't do that stood in my own personal way.
I would agree with both of you guys too. I haven't really faced any challenges per se either in my experience. And what I have learned though is it's super important to find those people who can support you and promote you and be your cheerleader, so to speak, to help you get to where you want to be. I think for a while there, I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't share it with anybody. And nobody can help you do that, get to where you need to be, if they don't know what your goals are. So I'd say that was something I learned fairly quickly. And it's, even my male counterparts and female counterparts have all been so supportive and an advocate of who's Noelle and what does she want to do when she grows up type of stuff. So it's been good.
That was awesome to hear. I do have kind of a follow-up question. Whoever wants to address this, they could. You all mentioned this internal block, you kind of being your own biggest stumbling block. And I was curious, from the women in workplace perspective, can any of you pinpoint what caused that for you? Was it your own, was it something internally? Was it an instance in undergrad? Was it fear entering the workplace like right out of undergrad?
For me, I can tell you, I really feel strongly that representation matters in all aspects of the careers and what you want to do. And so what I feel like became an obstacle for me is if I didn't see a version of myself in the role that I was pursuing, the ability to get there, that tangible kind of step forward, didn't seem as feasible for me, right? And so where then I started to kind of doubt, gosh, does that make sense? Or do I need to then check all of the boxes, right, to be able to get into that role? So if I see the job description, do I need to have every one of those experiences before I should maybe pursue it? And so I think in many ways, for me anyway, I can certainly say that a lot of me maybe not seeing those roles, and I'll tell you the other thing is getting out of school, and even as I was starting my career, I was really ambitious. And so this idea that, I look at my, rather a role that I saw and I felt like, gosh, I feel like I could maybe do that. Right. And even kind of from an age standpoint, growing up in your career and you see other people thinking you need more miles on your tires, right? You need a little bit more time, you need some of those things. So I think it was a culmination, right, of just feeling like I didn't necessarily see people that look like me in those roles that I was pursuing. And then I think the other part of it is, being ambitious and feeling like, how much push do I push? Do I just focus on getting miles on the tires? Do I focus on, what do I do? And so some of that was just that self-doubt along the way, trying to balance at what point you take some of those real critical moves in your career.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty spot on. I would add and say, I think for me, being an engineer or studying engineering, right? It was all my friends were male. And now even in the automotive industry, of course, it's male dominated, right? So I've been just surrounded with male peers all my life, which is fine. But when I graduated with my mechanical engineering degree and went to Aero, all my peers were electrical engineers. And so I didn't have confidence in myself because I didn't know what they knew. And it took me a while to figure out they didn't know what I knew. And so we're actually complementary, right? And we're a better team because I brought knowledge and experience that they didn't have. But it just took me a while to, I think kind of along the lines of what you said, Shatonna, like I wasn't them, I didn't know what they knew. And so I was like, shy and timid. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's, I totally agree. I think it's this mindset, right? There's been all these studies, and I don't have the exact percentages, Shatonna, you might, since it's your field of work, but just some of the studies that I've seen around, women won't apply for a job unless they have 100% of the qualifications checked off, and men will apply if they have like 70%, right? I mean, that's a pretty wide gap right there. In 30% of the time, we're limiting ourselves unnecessarily. So I think that's one thing. And I don't think there was like a particular phase in my career that I did it more than others. I probably still do it, admittedly. I probably still look at certain roles. And I agree with Shatonna about representation. If you can't see yourself there, it's really hard to see a path to get there, or to even think it's feasible. So I think that's definitely something. And then it's not only like this feeling of, a little bit of self-doubt before applying for a role, but let's say, I mean, in every job that I've had at Schwab, I've sort of been placed into a role or like selected to move into a position. And that's been really scary too, because I didn't necessarily have to go through the process of applying. I just got told, hey, you're going to go lead this sales organization. And in the back of my head, I was like, what? I can't do that. I've never done it before. I'm surrounded by male colleagues. This is like, who's going to help me with this, right? And I don't know if you guys have read anything on imposter syndrome, but that sort of sets in very quickly in terms of feeling like I am not qualified for this. And I have felt like that in probably every job I've had for the first year. And then I get small wins and I build my confidence, and you start to go, well, maybe I can do this, or, oh, this isn't as hard as I was making it seem, right? Like I sort of maybe overcomplicate things at the beginning. So
that's something, and again, like I still do it. I did it last year when I moved into the role that I'm in currently. But every time you do it, you sort of, grease the skids a little bit more and a little bit more, and you learn ways of coping. You learn like, oh wow, I can do this. And every time your on ramp sort of accelerates a little bit. Doesn't take as long to get there, and to build that confidence, you kind of go, okay, I know I can do this. I just don't know how yet, and then I'll figure it out. So that's, Jeannie, that's how I know if I'm growing or not. If I'm comfortable in a role, it's time to move on. And I like purposely put myself in the gray and the ambiguous, because I want to learn and figure out, how can I do this the best or whatever. And it's just me, it's just my personality, but like I'll just get bored if I'm comfortable. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. It sounds like you guys have some really awesome strategies for navigating through that. So
So we do have a chat question from one of our participants asking, do you all have any advice for how to find mentors, especially in male-dominated areas, and for how to tap into informal networks where you can learn about opportunities and build relationships with powerful people who can help you find future opportunities?
That's a big question. I can start. I think most companies have something called like employee resource groups, or, sort of groups based around, like we've got a women's group, we have a Black professionals group, we have an Asian Islands Pacific group, we've got a whole parenting group. There's all these different employee resource groups that you can join. And the nice thing is they sort of tackle these topics that are more akin to that subset of the population. And so that's where I've built a large amount of my network at Schwab, at least, is in these groups that are people sort of like me or focused on the same types of challenges or opportunities as I am. So I think that's one thing. The other thing I always recommend is like networking is so important. At least at our company, it's so relationship based. And, I tell all of the people that work on my team, I want you to get out every single month and meet somebody new and set up either a coffee or virtual coffee or whatever you can in this environment. And then before you get off the phone with that new person, you ask for 3 more people that you can meet with, right? And they're people that are outside of your current network. Most likely they work in other areas in different fields. And the benefit here is you're learning about the organization, you're learning about new teams in the company, you're just expanding your network of people. So when you do have to go ask for help, you have, different people that are coming at it from different points of view, which is often very helpful. In terms of mentors, for me, I've never taken like a formal, I need one mentor approach. I have sort of collected this like board of advisors through the years of, and I try to diversify that. I don't want just to find a female that looks and acts like I do, right? I want men that come from a different point of view, or women that come from a different point of view, that can help sort of round out what I'm doing and my perspective, and give me guidance based on where they've been. And then it's usually like whatever the situation is that I need advice on, I'll go, who could give me really good advice based on this particular situation? And I go to that person. And so then, again, if you've got your board of directors, you go to different people for different things, or that personally that has helped me. So anyway, I'll let the other ladies go.
I completely agree with what you're saying, Jeannie. And it's interesting that that kind of board of advisors, that personal board of advisors, is something that I've also done. I started probably doing that just only 5 years ago or so. The question of mentorship is really an interesting one, because I do think, depending on where you are, right? So if I think of you as a student, depending on where you are in your career, in your student career, depending on what you're involved with today, sometimes it's difficult to figure out, so where do I go? I know all of these people, where do I really go? And some of that is us taking the step to go and find someone. Say it's even an opportunity like this, right? Where you are, hearing from people, maybe you make a connection with someone, or you maybe, appreciate something someone says, and you decide, gosh, let me just send a note to that person and see if they would spend a little bit more time with me to talk through some things that I may be trying to work through. Some of it is just taking that step to initiate a conversation with someone based on exposure to even these types of events. When I think about being a student at CSU, when I think about my undergraduate, I didn't understand the importance of mentorship, and I really, really wish I had. I think that had I known a little bit differently how to navigate some of those challenges that I mentioned at the beginning, that where I got in my own way, and someone who can kind of champion me and to say, look, I hear what you're saying, I've experienced that, or here might be some ways to think through it. Or more importantly, just from a coaching standpoint, just to kind of help me to find my way, right, in a way that I could feel empowered and inspired to do that. I wish I would have done that. And I attended a lot of these types of events, even as a CSU student. I went to different community service events and even was connected with a lot of organizations. I'm a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, and so I pledged when I was on campus. And there were a lot of opportunities like this, but I would come in, I would hear, I would listen, and then I would leave, right? There was no kind of that step that I would take to go and try and introduce myself and make those connections that quite frankly would be critical, I think, or would have been critical for me throughout my career. And so that's one thing that I would say is take the step, right? And introduce yourself. I mean, that's what mentorship and making connections, and as Jeanie mentioned, building your network starts with you taking the step to introduce yourself, exchange phone numbers, and then that uncomfortable feeling of, would you like to get coffee, right? Or would you like to have a quick chat? It's not comfortable, but it's necessary. So that's what I'd recommend.
Yeah, you guys very well put. I would just say, in addition to that, there are these, some companies have like mentor programs, right? And they'll assign you somebody, and that's, it can work and it cannot work. It depends. But when you find someone who inspires you and who maybe is better than you and you want to be better, yeah, go say hi to that person, introduce yourself and become friends and build your network. If you surround yourself with people who, and I'm saying better, like, because I don't have a better word for it, but surround yourself with people who are better, who can lift you up, and then you'll get to where you want to be.
Okay, if I can add one more thing to that too, I think if any of you are attending things like internship programs, Arrow I know has it, and Noelle, you've mentioned it, has this phenomenal internship program that we have. And what I would even say is a lot of our interns have built relationships with different professionals that they've connected with. Again, not as necessarily just someone that's going to help you get that job, that job once you are, have completed your program, but as just a mentor or a person that has maybe been in the industry or can help you navigate, an almost informal coach, right? Just to help to navigate, to help to go to for advice. So that's another thing that I would certainly mention. If you're in an intern program and you meet professionals in that environment as well, that's another good way to do that.
Yeah, guys, that was great advice. Thank you so much. I think we're going to jump ahead to some of the questions that we have from the registration form. So that first one would be, what can men in the workplace do to be better allies? If anyone wants to kick us off with that.
So, did you want to go, Shatonna? Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. I mean, I think it's first of all, I think it has to be authentic, right? But I definitely think that there's an opportunity for men to sort of join the conversation, like even just hearing this conversation around women feeling like they limit their own potential or don't apply for that next job. The men that have really shown up for me in my career as an ally are those that come to me and go, hey, you should go do this. Hey, you'd be great at this. And just sort of helping me see the path that might not be clear to me because there isn't that representation of somebody in the role that looks or acts like me. And I've had a lot of men, actually, I've had probably more men than women do that in my career, where they say, you should go do this, or you can do this, or why wouldn't you apply for this? You'd be perfect. Just to help give me that validation or that confidence that maybe I'm missing on my own. So I think it's for men, it's recognizing where you can help boost other people up. And because oftentimes they don't come from that perspective, it's just, it's helping them, it's helping everybody see their own potential.
I would definitely agree with that. I mean, there are a number of different situations that I think happen where, Jeanie, to your point, where men can show up differently. I mean, when I think about meetings that we're in, being aware of male-dominated conversation, right? Being able to, you know, if you have your female counterparts who you feel like their voice is not being heard in a meeting, right? They're commenting and then their male counterpart comes in right behind them and says the same thing. And then all of a sudden the full group recognizes that last comment. Right. I think it's really our male counterparts also, you know, championing, to Jeannie's point, not only women in their organizations for roles, but then also women's voice, right? Really being able to challenge some of those stereotypes. I mean, we still face today where you have some men who, you know, may say things like, okay, so our, you know, our female counterpart is pregnant. We don't want to give her a lot of responsibility because she's pregnant or she's coming back with this child. And while that sounds really special and sweet, you don't need to make that decision for your female counterpart, right? Let your female counterpart manage his or her career, or manage her career, and let her come to you, or him come to you around any of those needs that they may have. But those are some of the things that seem like they're with such positive intent, but those can be things that, unfortunately, because of some of those stereotypes, they can hinder the ability for women to continue to progress, I would say, in any industry. And so some of it is be open to hearing a different voice and allowing the woman, a woman's voice to actually be heard. It's addressing where you have gender stereotypes. It's addressing some of those things and being, in my mind, quite frankly, having some of those crucial conversations that are not very easy to have, you know, to be able to hear a different perspective. And so those are just a few. I think, again, this is so timely because when we think about International Women's Day, there's so much about being the change, right? And so I think that there's a part of that that is us as women, and there's a part of it that is men that need to be a part of the change too, because we can't do it alone as women. We do need it's a collective effort for us to continue to see that progression. So that's kind of my thought.
Shatonna, can I add on to that really quickly?
Yes.
You just jogged a memory that I had of a boss that I had for about a year, and he told me two things one time, and I was like floored by it. He said, I mean, this is at this point I was in a managing director, so I was leading other leaders, right? So he said to me, I don't want you to ever be the one, you know, you go into a conference room for a meeting and there's like 10 people sitting around the desk and you have to dial into the phone number to connect with people, you know, in a different location. He said, I never want you to be the person to dial in. Do not come into the room and be the administrative assistant. You just sit back and you act like the leader. And for me, my personality is like, I'm going to help anybody and every, you know, like that just feels natural for me to take care of things like that. But it also sends a message, and it can, again, limit how other people see you. So he told me that. And then the other thing, I was so excited one time because we had this big sort of conference type of rally at our center. And there was like 200 people that were going to come, and we have this big stage, and I think our CEO or somebody was going to come talk. And I told him, Brian, guess what? I'm so excited. I was asked to run mics for Q&A. And he was like, you are not running mics for Q&A. There's plenty of people that can run microphones around. You are not going to be one of them. You're going to sit in the front row and you're going to ask a good question. And I was like, but it gave me a role, and I was excited to take on the role. But in his mind, it also created a perception of my worth. And a lot of times, like I was not thinking about that. I just want to be helpful. So anyway.
Totally agree. Do not be the note taker.
Yes, don't be the note taker.
You have to volunteer to take notes.
Yeah, let somebody else do it. Yeah.
But someone else can volunteer. Not that it's a bad thing to do, I completely agree with you, Jeanie. I think that's such good advice, and I completely agree.
And to get it from a male boss, you know, and I would never, I mean, it really floored me at the time. So I tell people on my staff all the time, you know, I try to give them that guidance and now imparting it to all of you. So you can start fresh from the beginning.
That's awesome.
I think that advice goes for us too, right? If women leading a meeting or whatever,
Yeah.
don't pick the other female to take notes or whatever. That doesn't, you know,
Yeah.
I'm guilty of that. But yeah, don't be the admin.
Yep, exactly.
That's some incredible advice that I honestly hadn't thought of either. And kind of there's different roles that we take on sometimes as women, volunteer ourselves because we feel like that's our spot. So yeah, thank you for that insight. Another question that someone had submitted is, do you have any tips for negotiating salary?
Well, let me start with a story. I don't know if this is a tip or not, but so when I worked at Arrow, I moved up from an engineer to project manager to managing a team of 8 to engineering director and leading a team of 40. So throughout that time, this particular instance, I'm going from a manager of 8 to a manager of 40. My boss, who was leaving, he wanted me to interview for his role, and he was like, you know, a big advocate. And basically, I had the job. I just had to go through the formality of interviewing. So when it came time for the offer, they're like, hey, you have the job, but we're going to give you, you know, this salary. And I knew I was worth more, and I knew the role was going to be more demanding, and I just knew I needed more money. And I was like, no, I'll just stay where I'm at, and I'll just stay a manager. And he was like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I don't want it. And so he comes back to me like the next day, and he's like, all right, I talked to my boss. We really can't budge. We really want you for the job. And I said, sorry, I need more money. And so then that night I had a dinner with customers, and my boss's boss was there. He comes up to me and he goes, you can have the salary you want. And I was like, awesome. And so I guess, you know what you're worth, and don't be afraid to ask for it. And 2, it's always easier to negotiate salary when you have a job already, right? It was easy for me to say no because I already had a job. But yeah, I was proud of myself in that regard.
It should be.
Wow. Yes, good for you. I would also add, understand the market. You know, I think sometimes what happens is, you know, I think Noelle gave such a good example. She understood the role and likely understood what the market paid for that role. I would say that that's some of the best research you can do, right? Is understand not only what you contribute, but there's so much data that's out there, right, around what market pays for certain types of positions. At least gain that insight so that, one, if you do come back and you're either countering on a salary or, you know, or you're going in with, hey, this is the salary I'm expecting with that, then you can have some insight, and you're coming from a place where a recruiter or a company can respect the perspective, and it doesn't just seem like you're completely off base. And so, you know, that's probably my one recommendation. And then the second is really just what Noelle said. I think we have to know our worth. And, you know, not every role is going to be okay or is going to have the budget to pay you what that looks like. And sometimes that may put you in a position where you have to make a critical decision for your career. If that isn't the role, it may not be that it's something about you, or it's because you're a woman, or it's something like that. They just, quite frankly, may not have the budget. And that absolutely happens. And so for me, I think, let me, you know, go in with positive intent, with a positive perspective, and certainly going in informed. And then as you come out of it, realize that then you have to make a decision. If they can't pay you that salary, pivot, and maybe it's an opportunity to move on. Or it may be something that you decide is something that you're able to financially deal with, and you take the role.
Great advice. The only thing I would add, and it might seem a bit controversial because you always hear always negotiate. I would say don't always negotiate. Like there there is a time and place, and there are situations that it makes a lot of sense to say, no, this is what, like the situation that Noelle just shared, that is absolutely a time where she's like, I know what I'm worth. I have a proven track record. You're clearly seeking me out for a reason, and I demand to be paid what I think I should be, or you know what, it's not worth it for me. And that's totally fair. There are other situations. I remember one time I was hiring a project manager, and he was moving up, I think 40%, it was maybe like 70% or something. It was some astronomical amount. It was like $40,000 increase or something, which already had to be approved by our head of finance. And he came back and tried to negotiate. And I was like, okay, clearly you don't understand. You're getting a huge bump, much more than I thought was probably warranted at the time. And honestly, it sort of planted a seed in me, like he clearly doesn't get it, you know? And so there are situations where it makes sense to push. There are other situations, like when I joined Schwab, they hire, 50 people at a time in these huge hiring classes, and that is non-negotiable. This is the amount that you got hired into the company. Subsequent moves might be negotiable, but like the entry point is not. And so, it tells a lot about somebody's emotional intelligence and their understanding of the landscape of when they choose to negotiate. So I would say don't always negotiate. That's not a blanket statement.
I love that, Jeanie. I think that is really, really good advice.
Thank you. Learned it the hard way, probably.
I think you said it. It comes with the emotional intelligence, but then also professional maturity, right? Yeah. You kind of learn that, I'm a firm believer of you bump your head a few times when you're in your career, and sometimes that's a good thing for you. Learn early on so that as you progress in your career, some of those things that start to impact your professional brand, right, are not so impactful, right? So learn some of these lessons at the earlier stage of your career. It's better too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing on that topic. It is pretty evident that you guys have a lot of wisdom to offer on that. So I know everyone in attendance definitely appreciates it. The next question I'm going to ask is, do you know of any good resources for women who have faced hostility and sexism in the workplace? The person who submitted this question is studying to become a career counselor, and they are wondering how they can better advocate for women who encounter these issues.
I as an HR person, right, I would say there are probably a number of places to do that. I'm always a believer of start with the company's HR team, because I think at minimum, what you can actually show is that you have gone through a proper notification to the organization around certain concerns that may be happening. So if you have a certain person, a person who is experiencing, sexism or discrimination of any sort, putting the organization on alert allows them the opportunity to change that situation, right? So rather it's going through some sort of investigation, whatever disciplinary action that may be appropriate in the situation, or whatever is appropriate. And then I would say that there are absolutely a lot of agencies then outside of those organizations that's, their focus is to ensure that discrimination is not happening within organizations. So certainly the Equal Employment Opportunity Council or the EEOC, there's OCR, the Office of Civil Rights as another organization or entity that certainly supports some of those things. And I would say that in terms of just overall advocacy, I know that there are a number of organizations, I certainly am not familiar with all of them, that really work on reform, and some of those different things that might be a good way to kind of connect to what are other ways of training and some of those things that may be helpful that you can kind of become a part of. But for me, from an HR perspective, and certainly someone that prior to HR was also in just leadership roles, I'd say start first with the company's HR team so that you can put the company on alert.
Yeah, I don't have anything. When I was reading that question, I haven't dealt with it personally, so I haven't done a whole lot of research, but I had the exact same thing that I was thinking, which is start with, if something came up where I just felt discriminated against or something happened that I felt uncomfortable with, I would absolutely go to HR. That would be my first stop. Most companies have human resources and employee resources. So you'd sort of have to determine which one to start with based on the scenario, if it's HR or ER, but I think they'll sort of direct you in the right place if you start with the wrong one. they'll get you locked into the right place.
I would add to that, a lot of organizations also have anonymous hotlines, right? That I think are also a really good way, because not everyone initially wants to put a face to a situation, right? You want to, maybe raise a particular issue that's occurring, and then maybe an investigation occurs as a result of that, but you don't, because of whatever concerns you may have, perceptions of retaliation or whatever it may actually be, you don't feel comfortable. And while I think most organizations have an anti-retaliation policy, people still are fearful, right, of bringing certain issues either on behalf of a colleague, going back to that question around advocacy, or as a colleague or as an actual professional going through or experiencing something. So I would say another avenue would certainly be more of an anonymous hotline that most organizations have.
I don't really have anything to add. That's what I would say too. So.
Right, and our last submitted question from the registration forum, y'all can still submit questions via the Q&A or chat box, what are the best steps or tactics to be well respected and seen as a strong visionary leader within your company or industry?
Well, in my mind, first, see yourself that way, right? So I think so much of that is, when you feel and believe that that is your, that's who you are, you project that, right? You come in, and if you're innovative, people will see you as innovative, as the person coming up with different ideas. Be a collaborator, right? If you want to kind of bring people in, innovate, and then bring people in as a part of your thoughts, and be willing to collaborate and partner with people to bring people along the way. You want to be viewed as strong, lead with strength, right? But then also with humility, right? Because a lot of times I think we misinterpret that strength means that you're a jerk, right? Or you have to be overly assertive, or you don't allow yourself to kind of hear people. So lead with strength, which means often you're making difficult decisions. You might have difficult messages, but you do it in a way that people see you as human, and you do it in a way where you're respecting people, you're respecting perspective. And, in my mind, so much of that also means that, people talk a lot about bringing other people in that are certainly smarter than you, and certain, things like that, but also be willing to learn, right? Just because you're a leader and you're strong and you're all of these things doesn't mean you know all the answers. And so be willing to allow yourself to hear other people's voice. And again, going back to kind of bring people along the way. But I believe strongly that so much of what you want people to see, as long as you're not going all out overly trying, because then that kind of makes it not, doesn't make it authentic. Be true to yourself, be true to who you are, and then, be humble. I think that's where a lot of it comes into. You don't have to be a jerk.
Yeah, I think I got a lot of my confidence when I started to work on myself. And who is Noelle, and what does she want to do? Strengths and weaknesses, how I interact with other different personalities. Like, if you know who you are, you can then be authentic, and that shows when you're trying to, make a name for yourself. If you want that respect, if you want to be strong, or whatever it is, be yourself, be authentic, like you were saying, Shatonna. But I think to be authentic, you have to know yourself too. And I think that's important. Yeah.
Well, the only thing I would add, I think you have to earn the respect. You have to earn the right? And that's through showing respect. And I agree wholeheartedly that, you have to bring other people in. It's great to have a point of view. It's great to be a visionary and want to be seen that way. But it's equally, if not more important, to be seen as a collaborator, and that you are open-minded and you don't have blinders on, right? Like, great that you have a strong point of view, but you got to take the blinders off sometimes and go, what am I not seeing? What am I missing? What is another take on this from a different vantage point, which there are many. So yeah, I think it's getting your point of view out there, but doing it in a way that you allow others in, and it's collaborative, and it's going to help shape the strategy. And then you come to it and say, this is a well-baked strategy and we've had, X, Y, and Z departments and people weigh in on it, and people are going to trust that a lot more than if you don't shop it around first. So anyway, I think that will sort of get you the right to have that respect and to be that person that people go to, because they know you're not gonna take sort of a siloed approach. You're gonna make sure that it's really well-rounded.
Yeah, definitely. I think all of that is super helpful and important for us all to think about, no matter what kind of workplace we're looking to in the future. So I think we'll wrap up with this last question. Is there any last bit of encouragement or advice that you would like to offer our students and alumni as they embark on their careers?
I can start. I think what is most important is the mentality you're going to have in the workplace. And what has always helped me, and I tell people this all the time, is whatever job I'm in, even if I feel like I should be at that next job, whatever job I'm in, I do the very best I can possibly do. I am fully focused. I'm fully committed. I try not to be stuck on a timeline where you're like, I got to get, I'm in a hurry. How fast can I get to that next role? I just really buckle down and commit and focus to whatever job that I'm in. And people take notice of that. And people also take notice that you're not in a rush. And believe me, it will come. Like, I think I was at Schwab 5 years before I got promoted to a leadership position. I got promoted then to director by 29 years old, and then an officer of the company in the executive ranks by 33. And I would have never, ever, I never set out to do that. I was like, can I be a leader? I don't even know if I can be a leader. Do I want to be a leader? And that was, it's not something I set out to do. I just want to do the best job that I can in every job. And people then trust you, and they want to promote you. They want to get you in front of bigger groups. It sort of happens naturally. So I would say, learn as much as you can, do an incredible job out of the gate at each job that you're in, meet as many people as possible, and use good judgment, and the rest will follow. And good luck to you all.
Noelle, do you want to go? Or you want me to go ahead?
You go ahead.
Gosh, I would say maybe a couple of things. If I think about, again, just kind of thinking about my own career and some of the things that I wish I would have done differently. And again, I don't regret. So I'm glad every step in my career and the decisions I've made have made me the person that I am today. And so for that, I'm grateful and I'm thankful for some of that. But I would echo one of the things that Jeanie said, and that is, strive to be the best version of yourself. And sometimes that means making changes. That may mean changing some of the things that you're doing that you realize or that you learn are getting in your way of being successful. I think the other part I would say is taking some risks, calculated risks. Take some of those risks that make sense, right? You might go into one career, again, my undergrad was in communications, and then you may realize that that isn't the right decision, or maybe that you want to do something different. And take a risk and do something that makes sense for you, that is, the right decision for you ultimately, but, be willing to take some of those risks along the way. The other thing that I would say is be willing to pivot. And especially I would say this past year has taught us all that we have to pivot, meaning we have to, not be so focused on just one thing, only one way of thinking, only one way of thinking about your career, only one, you're going into an engineering role. And so all you can think about is this one thing, right? Or you're going in HR and all you can think about is that you want to be this, right? Be open, right? Open-minded, allow yourself the opportunity to see a picture that may be bigger than you're thinking today, and be willing to kind of pivot along the way. And then the other thing that I would say is learn that it's okay to be authentic today, because it's a much more difficult way to try and figure that out as you're going about your career. And I think Jeanie mentioned it earlier today, that imposter syndrome, that coming into work being one person, leaving out of work being somebody different. Bringing the best version of yourself also means that you're able and you're confident in being who you are and how you show up being. And that may mean that you're growing. I don't want to misinterpret that in any way or want you to misinterpret. That doesn't mean not being professional in the environment. It doesn't mean not showing the best version of yourself. It means show up who you are, what you believe in, the type of music you listen to. I've gotten into situations where I hear someone talking about something. I love hip hop, I love R&B, I love all of these different music, but I may be in an environment where not everyone is sharing that perspective, right? So I don't want to say that I'm going to a J. Cole concert at the end of the day because no one's going to understand that, right? And so then me holding a part of myself back because not everybody understands or might share that perspective. So me being authentic is, this is who I am, this is what I enjoy, championing other people and leaving voice for that. So what I would say that is, as you're going about your career, learn and know that it's okay for you to be who you are and showing up the best version of yourself. That person that is here, that is right now, the best version of you, and all that is you, your family dynamics, all of those things, that is you, and show up that way today. And that way it's easier for you to stay true to yourself as you're going about your career.
You made me think of something, Shatonna. So when I was leading a team of like 40 engineers, I worked hard to get up to that point, right? And my personal life, I didn't really ever bring into the work life. I showed up for work, I did my job, and I left. And when I was running this team of 40, I went on travel with a couple of them, and one of them was like, we don't really know who you are. Like, we don't even know what kind of music you like. We don't know anything about you. And I was like, that's weird. And it's something I just didn't really realize. And so I actually did a presentation after that of, this is Noelle, and this is her family, and this is what she does, and all that stuff. And they really appreciated it. I'm not just a robot, I'm also a human. And sometimes I forget because I want to do the best job. I show up maybe a little too much, but yeah, I would say be you, of course, respectful, professional, all those things, but also don't be afraid to fail. And I think you ladies shared that sentiment too. I mean, especially from an engineering role, we are afraid to fail. We don't want to fail, but that's how you learn, whether it's in engineering or anything else. So, and make sure you're working for someone or a company that allows you to fail, because that's how you grow and learn. So.
Well, I just want to say a final thank you to all of our participants today for submitting your questions, both in the chat and also in the registration form. And a final thank you to our panelists. You all shared so much wisdom today that I am going to take with me as I continue and pursue my career. And I'm sure all of our participants gained a little something from each of you today as well. For our participants, I hope that you all will consider joining us every other Monday for more career connections. Many of our attendees are CSU Alumni Association members, so thank you so much for your membership. It helps make events like these possible. If you would like to learn more about membership or connect through additional engagement, you can go and visit alumni.colostate.edu. So thank you all again for participating, and as always, go Rams.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.